thank you all for being here. We talked over lunch a bit about just a broad topic of narratives in Europe and telling stories in Europe and about Europe. And we got into pretty heated discussion over lunch, so I hope our guests still have the energy to go through it one more time. I will ask them some questions, but then I hope you will jump in, because we're going to try to cover a pretty broad range of topics. We have the whole food chain represented here, from directors, producers, distributors. So we're going to try to go into each part a little bit. But there's one question that came up and that I think is a good starting point for our discussion, and I will ask each of our panelists to take a crack at it and try to answer it. And maybe we could start with Mikael. Is there such a thing as a European narrative? This is a concept that's been appearing recently a lot. It's also part of funding schemes. So can we talk about something that is called the European narrative?
Yeah, it works. Well, I of course gave it a thought since I was invited to be part of a panel. The short answer is no, but it's difficult to answer because I don't know exactly what the European narrative is actually. So obviously, if you should start by saying yes or no to a concept or something, whether you think it exists, it's nice to know more exactly what it is. But if we talk about it if we understand it as a common European way of telling stories, I think deep down maybe there is. But if we then look upon the difficulties on making stories travel, I think it's difficult. But there's so many. I mean, of course, we'll go more in depth. There's so many different aspects of it. I could just say a few sentences that I think we are in extremely interesting times in terms of there's never been so many documentaries available out there because of the digital distribution format. So it's really accessible. I think it's fantastic. And you can see how people from all over the world, and also Europe, of course, watch documentaries from other countries. But on the other hand, that's the documentaries that are for free. So you can now get an audience which would be very limited in your own country, but if you add the target groups or the minorities or what you should call them in different countries and add them together from all over Europe, you can actually access quite a huge audience. So in one way they are definitely traveling. In another way, when you try to sell them, when you try to finance them internationally, it's really, really difficult. So, and if I look at the map of Europe, I see more differences in terms of storytelling than I see one single European narrative. So just to make it all very fluffy, no, not from the beginning, but there are other aspects to it.
I mean, I can only talk from the position of a producer-director who started with my former film to find financing on the European market, and back then I mean the main reactions were still like, oh, okay, a story from Romania, maybe. So what's the theme? Art, okay, maybe. And I could really penetrate somehow the market because it had a subject that would appeal also to be appealing for Western Europe. Because I think we still had more than today the difference between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And now, I don't know how many years later, 2009 to today, so 5-6 years later, I realized that trying to find financing with my next film it was already, this wall was a bit thinner already. People would be more interested in East European stories, and now I realize that the main competitions of the really important festivals have actually more East European stories sometimes than Western stories. So I think so now slowly the two West and Eastern parts come together, and even now, for example, in my case with my last film with Toto and his sisters, I think I'm extremely lucky because we just found a theatrical distribution in France. You know, and for a Romanian documentary to have this, a wide distribution with 30 to 40 copies in French cinemas is great. It means that somehow, okay, there is now, at least from my point of view, okay, there is a common European way of storytelling in documentary that is accepted in the West. And it's not still like, okay, from Eastern Europe we expect whether it's about a revolution, because it's 20 years since then or something, or about, let's say, about art, you have a chance, or it's funny with some chicken and hands and, you know. But in the meantime, they accept, I think, a wider, you know, more themes from Eastern Europe than it was, I don't know, 5 years ago.
Hello everyone, as I'm from Croatia, and for like 20 years we live this transitional period, so this new narrative is like created day by day basically, so we have new narrative every day, like, so when I see very big similarities now, Croatia with Romania, as you are suing all these ex-politicians or former president, and I mean, I'm trying to catch up. I mean, that's what is happening now in Croatia. So when you send ex-prime minister to the prison, then the narrative changed completely, because completely new, everything new arrived, including the cultural strategy, cultural policy, culture whatever. So it's locally, it's changing. So I really agree with Mikael, like what would be the narrative? There is no unique narrative, but maybe it sounds like a floskula maybe, but these diversities between all our countries will create a new narrative at some point. This is wonderful for Alex, for example, that Romanian film is traveling and you have some distribution, but you're one of few from Eastern Europe, for example. Like in Croatia, it is very hard to push through as well. I think I can speak for whole ex-Yugoslavia that our films can't travel so much. I think that HBO in a way saved us, because they improve a lot of money. So back there, it is also again connected with money. So we'll talk probably more about it later. So to assume it, I don't think there is a narrative. I think it can be, and I think it can be very diverse in a way.
I think there is a slight difference between American documentaries or African documentaries or European documentaries, but it's difficult to pinpoint what the differences are. There's also a difference between Eastern films and Western films in the subject and the way it's told, because it's linked to the country's history. So there's some things that comes from the background that you can't find in different areas. But it's, yeah, I couldn't say exactly what the common European narrative is.
And is there something as a distributor, when you look at films, are there some things you think about, let's say, well, this is a film that comes from the East, or this is a film that comes from the West, apart from the history? Are there other elements that set them apart, maybe in terms of the way the stories are told?
To us, it doesn't really matter whether the film comes from the East or the West, but there needs to be like, the subject needs to be able to appeal to people from different places, like they have to be able to recognize something in it and or find something new, but that they can still somehow link their lives to it.
Alex, since we brought up this question, as a director who's thinking of stories to tell and looking, well, in your own country for stories, do you think of a story as something that might be seen and understood by somebody who lives in Denmark or Germany or the UK, or you're thinking more of, well, this is a Romanian story that needs to be told, and we'll see afterwards?
It's an interesting question because I was actually thinking about this, you know, how, because I completely forgot how I addressed this with my last two projects. If I thought about, okay, would that be a story that is relevant internationally or universal, or I don't know. I mean, maybe with you know, with my first film that I did in Romania, it was about art, about pop art. It was, you know, the first guy who invented by himself pop art in Romania and parallel to the West without having. So there was for sure, let's say, a hook that was sellable internationally, but my personal drive why I started to make the film was because he reminded me of my grandfather, you know, so, which is not so sellable, you know, you can tell people like, you know, he's like my grandfather, and will say, and who cares, you know. So I think there's a difference in between, you know, what is really your own ignition, why you go for a story, and why it becomes so good in the end, and the point with which you sell it in the beginning, you know. So I think there's there's the marketable part that you have to sell and tell people in the West, and while you pitch at IDFA, for example, like, why is it important, you know, because every single commissioning editor while you pitch will say, but why should it be important for my country? And you have to have a common answer for everybody somehow. So, yeah.
Mikael, you have an experience as a producer, and you go around Europe and helping people to figure out how they can get their films made. Is this a topic you talk to them about? How that story, how a local story can become universal? Is this something that comes up often in discussions?
It comes up all the time. I find it difficult to discuss theoretically because it's so fluffy, but usually when we talk about it, at least the way I see it, when I try to evaluate whether a film can travel, I always work with three different levels, and I think each of the levels is a level where someone can access the film, the story. And if you meet it at all three levels, it's wonderful. The first level is a simple, is the thing we see. Is that dramatic enough? Because then we know that every story can travel. What I mean by that is James Bond. A James Bond film, if I could take a fiction film example, is only A level. There's no deeper level there, I would claim. But it's dramatic enough to travel. Then there's a B level where something happens with the people I see on the film that I can access, that makes me, you know, engage, that makes me identify with the people. So it doesn't have to be very dramatic on the A level, but it can be very emotional, or, you know, something I can connect to from a human level on the B level. And then there's the C level, which is what is it basically about? There might be, you know, this specific story with this main character, but basically it's about death or love or whatever, you know, the bigger theme, the Greek drama. Huh? And I think all three levels are I think you need one of those three levels, and again, if you have all three of them, it's wonderful. But those are the three levels where I feel that you can access stories that are, if you take them from how they are described in the catalog, very, very local. So we all know examples of films that are extremely local. If you try to describe that it takes place in this remote Croatian Serbian village, but then there's the bigger story or a dramatic story that can make it travel. So, but that's not. I mean, if we should come back to, that's not the European narrative. That's more a way of accessing stories um, all over the world. But yes, definitely, those are the things that we discuss when we meet in these international contexts and discuss what will make your film travel. Huh?
We're going to screen 2 trailers just so we can exemplify some of the discussion. I think this might be a good moment to look at Alex's trailer for Toto. That was he screened it in 2011 when he was still looking for funds.
Yeah, that was the first. So with every documentary, you know, I start to invest something up front, film for 2 or 3 months, then go to the editing room for another 2 months or 3 months, and really in this very long time edit a very good trailer that can stand internationally at pitching forums. And that was the one we pitched at the ITFA Central Pitch in 2011.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna watch Alex's trailer and then see if it meets Mikael's 3 criteria.
De când am căzut eu la pușcărie, n-au fost despărțiți niciodată, unul de altul. S-au iubit toți 3. N-am făcut nicio diferență între ei. Că n-au crescut cu tată, eu le-am fost și tată și mamă.
Cum sunt supărată, mie să fac orice să mă arunc pe geam, să plâng, să, nu știu. Am niște reacții foarte multe.
În baza articolului 302 de procedură penală, punem în discuție menținerea stării de arest a inculpatei. Aveți cuvântul, doamna procuror.
So Alex, I was wondering if you could tell us, also going from what Mikael has said, what were you trying to tell them that your movie is about as a universal theme, and then what happened?
Yeah, I mean, now, seeing it now, I realize I guess I tried to put the whole film in in the trailer to
Often done.
yeah to tell, you know, to see the different characters and the storylines already in a short trailer. Yeah, I think that was the main purpose, to understand the characters and the emotional. I don't know, the emotional relationships. That's all, you know. I don't think it matters from this if it's now taking place in Romania or in another country. So,
did it matter to the people you were pitching it to? Did it work?
It worked until somebody said. Because we were also supported by an NGO who helped us to get into the ghetto, and somebody said, like, what are they doing in this project? Oh, so you're making a film for them? And from there they destroyed the whole pitch, because it was impossible to tell now, no, we are not doing the film for this NGO, you know. So yeah. That was but the outcome of ITFA was that we had financing afterwards. Yeah.
Oliver, can you talk about some similar experiences with some of the films you produced?
Da. So as I said, I would say that this is one of the projects. I mean, there is a lot about finances, and there is. For me, there is 2 things. One is to make a film, another one is to sell the film. I mean, the powder is not really cleaning everything they say in commercial, but when we are preparing our directors for the pitching, like we are trying to read through all the catalogs who would be there and how to really create and who to direct to. There is kind of universal story, but still not all the commissioning editors are there, and there is obvious. There is very obvious hierarchy among them, and it's very important. Mikael knows it very well. it's very important who is running the pitching forum, for example, because if you give the word to someone who doesn't like your project or you don't know anything about it, then you can destroy everything what really happened to him. And it happened to several of my friends because the moderator was not good at all. I mean, it started with someone bad, and so you probably also know, like Nick Fraser was always like king of the guy who is running BBC Storyville, for example, and everybody were listening to him and looking at him as a god. And the guy is like British, very cynical in a way. If he didn't like the project, he got the word first. I mean, nobody dared to say something good about the projects. And after that, it happened to be, after two years when they made a film, I mean, it happened to be that the films were good. But, I mean, nobody wanted to say anything against Nick Fraser because he's Nick Fraser. So it's happening, many small things are happening during the process, and it can be very easily destroyed by many things in a way. So about my experience, so we had, you will see the trailer later, so we have a film called Gangster of Love. It's premiered 2 years ago. It traveled quite a lot, and it's Croatian, German, Romanian co-production. And we've been lucky, but we also passed like 7 different pitchings. We've been in Thessaloniki, in Lisbon, in Zagreb, Eurodoc, I don't know, ITFA as well, Jihlava. And basically nobody wanted the project. They said it's very local. So the story is about the matchmaker from Croatia, from something we called Croatian Jesus Land. It's very like remote city, hill. I would say like people that they behave different than us in Zagreb. I mean, it is a bit arrogant to say, but I mean, we are aware of these differences in Croatia as well. Anyway, there is a matchmaker, he has a huge club and he married already 280 couples. But everybody said, no, I mean, this is a very local story. So after all these pitchings, we were already exhausted. We made the film on our own money. And luckily, after like 7 pitching in Jihlava, where we showed something like 8 minutes of material, and it happened to be comedy, that comes to another stereotype about the Balkans. When it happened to be like comedy travesty about the Balkans, then they said, okay, we want the film. So we got Arte on board, then we got Romanian Cence, then we got some others, because in the first version of the film we had also Romanian character. It happened not to be in the final version of the film. But I want to say that we played with the stereotypes, and when we caught someone after like 2 years of pitching, then we got some money, we got some finances. It could happen that it didn't work in this respect.
I think it'd be a good idea to watch the trailer for Gangster of Love and then talk a little bit about this idea of expectations, the stereotype of what's in a movie coming from the Balkans or East, and then what's coming from the West.
Znaš koliko? 55-6 godina.
54.
Je, ali to je kada je napisala se, ali već ima nekoliko godina na to kod mene na listi. Još sad ti manje reka godina. Ima 60 godina. Tako da ćemo...
Onda li živaju?
Volja muškarac da je higijeničan, iskren, čistopleten, kako se kaže, da vodi računa od sebe.
So can you say a little more about playing with the stereotypes and how you said earlier that you wanted to present it as a serious kind of movie, but it just wasn't working, so you had to do it differently. And can you tell us why you felt you needed to do that? And does it happen with other movies that you produce from the region?
I mean, this is one of the examples how, like, what stories would be sold. I mean, I'm not a big fan of this, but you need to play with the players, and that's how we played, and finally we got some money. So for us, it was very important to make the film about the stereotypes that are in Croatia. It's very hard to marry Bulgarian woman there with a kid. And I mean, to show how the society is really playing. There was a couple of other characters that couldn't find partner, because it was very incredibly hard for them, because of potential partners would look for something else. And it wouldn't work, it didn't work this way. For us it's a stereo story. It happened to be a comedy because of our, I would say, even a bit noble attitude that some people there are more funny and they're behaving funny, talking funny, thinking funny. It's far away from, I mean, we need to face it in a way. But it shows Croatian society in a way, I would say. But not only Croatian, I would say it shows much broader picture. Then when it came that people recognized kind of this Balkan style, that when they recognize it's comedy, because comedy can talk different languages and it's much easier. I mean, for me it was the same story all the time, but as long as it was serious, it was local story. Like Croatian story, nobody wants to watch film about Croatian filmmaker. When the same story got some funny moments, comic moments, it became universal. Actually, I mean, okay, there is a lot to discuss, but basically it's something that we faced during the process, because when you turn to comedy, then maybe something clicked also to the people's heads. When you say Balkan, people think about Kusturica, people think about gypsies, about different things. I mean, every country or region has its own PR that is good or bad. At some point, it's changeable now.
Like, so the film did loads of festivals. I'm curious if it sold well also.
More festival, like it is sold more on the festivals, more than 40 festivals around the world. It is important for us because we traveled a bit with the film, and then we followed the reactions in Canada, on the Q&As in Belarus and Russia and blah blah. We wanted to check how the people are really reacting. It was like a really amazing experience, but it's too long to talk now. It was sold on, I don't know, 10 televisions, mostly in pre-sales after this Jihla pitching. Like everything happened in one day, basically. After 2 years, everything was like everybody wanted the film. But in cinemas, no. I mean, a bit of theatrical distribution in Germany. We had Croatian distribution that passed quite well because the guy is very well known in Croatia. There would be, I think, some Serbian limited distribution, but that's all. I mean, in cinema it didn't work. For the television, so we can say. And the festival, it went very good.
Because I think that's also a reality of documentaries nowadays, that they can be sold, but it's mostly through festivals that they cannot get the wider audience and wider life. And it's not always who are they made for, because you have pitching and trying to get TV broadcasters on board, but now festivals are really helping promote the films in a way.
Before we turn it over to the audience, and it's very easy for, well, all of us to immediately link the story with how it travels, how it sells, but maybe we can stay on the subject of story just a little longer. And we brought up this question earlier, and I wanted to put it on the table again. Is there a way that European documentary filmmakers try to tell stories differently than, let's say, American filmmakers, since American films are all around us, especially in the region? We talk about small versus big stories, so
yeah, maybe it could be interesting to just for a moment. I mean, we're trying to find out whether there's a European narrative, but maybe it could be interesting to try to talk about it. So what are the big differences within Europe? Because I think there are some major differences that are obviously Eastern and Western Europe. I mean, 50 years of communism has definitely done something to the way of filmmaking. And on the other side, a harsh market economy has definitely done something to filmmaking. I think there are differences between the Protestant and the Catholic countries. I think there's a huge difference between the Anglo-American tradition that has a much more narrative-driven, TV journalistic approach compared to, for instance, Finland, Poland, Russia, that has a much more respect for the unity between space and time in film, meaning basically that you stay within a scene and you don't have it interrupted by a theme-driven comment from an expert or whatever. So there's so many differences, and maybe it's rather than a European narrative, maybe we should more look on what is TV doing to our way of storytelling, because I think that TV does a lot. I think that TV formats our way of storytelling more than the differences between the countries. I don't have that's one of the things I can see, and of course you can see. We talked about it today during lunch, because I think it was you, Alexander, who mentioned that the tradition that comes out of several of the former communist countries is more films that stays in moments, or whatever we should call them, and don't rush on to a very dramaturgical driven format. Is that because of traditions from 50 years without the marketplace, in the same sense that we know it from Western Europe? I think these things are interesting. I don't have an answer for that, but I can just see that there are so many differences within Europe that must have a reason. And of course also some similarities, absolutely, especially if we go to the Arab tradition, where I think which I as a European find very difficult to access and to actually analyze what is the narrative structure of Arabic films. You can see a very different way of storytelling. So I know I'm raising more questions than I'm giving answers, but I just find that extremely interesting. And my worry is, of course, I think that European working together is extremely important. But my worry is, of course, that we also diminish the differences. And this is where I see the commercial broadcasters market as the biggest threat to that. I'm worried about that. It does something that TV is so formatted, and it does something that your film is shown where we all know that someone can zap the next second, whereas the films that you buy a ticket, you enter a cinema, you can tell the story in a totally different way. So there's a lot of elements there, and I think my curiosity lies towards, so what is the internet now doing to that? I'm sure it will influence our storytelling. I have no doubts about it. I don't know what it will mean. But if, for instance, we will get rid of the slot structure. What is the slot structure doing to our storytelling? The fact that it has to fit 52 minutes. That will change with the internet. You can have stories of 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 2,000 minutes. I mean, and still be, in a way, distributed by a broadcaster. But it doesn't have to fit the slot structure. So there's so many, I don't know. I'm just thinking loud.
Question, since we're talking about a European narrative, and Mikael mentioned differences that are there, but sometimes we try not to, bring them out. What do you think is the role of a feature documentary, something that's not made for TV, in giving us a little bit of a universal European identity, but still trying to explain the particulars of a place? Is that something, Alex, as a filmmaker, you think about? Showing something that's uniquely Romanian, but it matches with what's happening in, I don't know, Europe.
No, I don't know, but maybe people many times address me as, okay, you make documentaries, so you're really interested in, important issues that are, issues of our time and so on. And unfortunately, I mean, it just happened that I make documentaries. I never meant to do that, you know. And I'm not interested in this approach to documentaries. I'm just interested in storytelling and in making films, whether it's, you know, documentary or fiction. It's not really so important for me. And I just try to tell a good story about things that I'm interested in. I mean, in particular with documentaries, I try to find themes that will enrich my life experience while doing them. You know, I don't think about, oh, now I have to do an important film about this important theme, and people should learn that I have important answers to important questions. Not at all. I just think about nice stories. When I grew up, films that I loved are films like Once Upon a Time in America, you know, and that's my feeling of cinema. And that's also how I approach stories. It doesn't matter if I do them in theater or in film. So I'm not, I'm not really interested in important themes. I don't know.
Oliver, how do you stand on this?
No, like I don't care if the story is Croatian or so-called universal or whatever. I mean, it's important for me that it is kind of story. As I'm producer and I'm just helping directors to come to the stories and to shape it and to find money. After all, I mean, for me it's important that there is, as you say, head and a tail of the story. But I never looked for that it is like Croatian film, because I mean there is no such thing basically. People would recognize at some point something Croatian. Somebody else would say it's universal. I mean, it really goes from situation to situation. But when producing films, I'm looking for to make it good story after all. But it doesn't have this label of specific Croatian or something like this.
But in terms of Alex was saying that there is a bias that a documentary film be something important and it should address the current issues. And I think part of the idea behind, you know, the idea of having a narrative for Europe is that documentaries might shape or help us understand something that's common. Do you feel that? Do you feel that, I don't know, if it's pressure, as Alex said, he doesn't really...
No, I mean, that's why newspapers are there, you know, to shape our, current affair things, you know. I would never, you know, I always try to think about, when I make a film, I always think about, okay, would that thing be better told in a one-page newspaper page, you know? And if that's the case, then it's not something for a film. Then it's something for a newspaper or for a reportage on TV, you know? So, because I think of documentary more in terms of cinema, you know, not in terms of something that has to inform people. It has to transform maybe people, you know, give them an adventure for a short time, they watch it, and take them through different emotional journeys and self-discoveries and whatever, but not in terms of information.
I mean, that's one of the biggest paradox actually of this, what is industry, like means television, who are supposed to buy a film, and your author's dimension of the film that you are making. And as things are shifting and the new players are coming in the television industry field, that's how the directors can see where to go and where to ask for the money. I mentioned this HBO. So before HBO Central Europe, who started to give money to Hungarian, Romanian and Polish films before all, and now they are coming to Adria, to ex-Yugoslavia, that will push a lot ex-Yugoslavian countries, if I may say so. They help a lot because they give them a big amount of money and they make film travel. And basically when there is HBO behind something, for example, it's much easier for the story, if the HBO is behind something that people will, it's not very easy to say it's a local story anymore. I mean, there is very slippery field where somebody can say story about Roma people using drugs in Romania. I mean, it's a very local story. But there is also the dimension of the good filmmaking, but also financing and also some other things that are happening, and also previous very successful and very good film. But there is a very slippery territory. So basically, I don't understand why somebody in Netherlands wouldn't be interested in what is happening in Croatia, or vice versa, or Romania, or somewhere else. It just depends how commissioning editors are. Do they dare to give the story to their audience and to create something around that story? Because there is lots of different things that really generate the program of the television, and what they assume there is a public interest of their audience. I mean, nobody really knows it. It is just.
That was what Michael was saying with, that actually TV is perverting the storytelling, because it's looking for, like you say, like for boxes, it's looking for seams, and it's perverting the whole thing, because we don't have a market like in the States. You can still sell documentaries. They can still be successful, and even the TV stations like HBO in the States, they look for real stories and put a lot of money into them. So there's more of a freedom, but in Europe everything is small, small TV stations in small territories that are all looking for themes that they think would fit their audience, and they have small budgets, and then you have to fit all these different commissioning editors that all don't want to lose their job that they have since 15 years, and they would never do bold things, I don't know, I started to be part of the industry about, 7-8 years ago, and it's still the same people in the same positions. How can they be bold?
So I'm curious, Mikael and Hanna, if all of us wanted to be cynical and started selling things to fill those boxes, because there's demand for that, what would fill those boxes right now? Are there some subjects, some topics, some stories in Europe that would be bought right away to fill those boxes? What sells now?
Could I not answer that question? Is that okay? No, we
can come back to that.
We can come back to that. No, I just wanted to react to my dear friend here beside me, because I don't agree on that being the position of broadcasters. We could talk a lot about that. I'm more afraid of the slot format formatting our documentaries. But just to get back to the discussion before, I think one of the problems with documentary is that we are so close to journalism. Well, actually, we are not close to journalism, but we are mixed up with journalism in the discussion all the time. The subjects never come up when we discuss fiction, huh? Of course, sometimes they do, but it's never the starting point. But it's very often the starting point with documentaries. I totally agree with what's interesting in documentary is not the presentation of reality. That's the journalist's objective, to present reality. The documentary director's objective is to interpret reality, and that's something completely different. There are very, very, very few stories that haven't been told 1,000 times already. Imagine Elvis Presley coming into a music studio and the owner of the studio asks him, "So what is your song about?" "Well, it's about love." "Sorry, Elvis, we heard that before." You cannot imagine that, and I think that's one of the big problems with documentary, that of course it's the director's interpretation, artistically and content-wise, that are interesting, and I think that's the essence of documentary. I just tell you a little story about the act of killing that I hope a lot of you have seen. It was when I was still producing. It was my company that produced it. I left the company before it went into real production, but it was still with us for 2 or 3 years. And in the beginning, when we tried to engage someone in the subject, it was this film about the atrocities and the killings that happened in Indonesia in the 60s. We couldn't sell that. Nobody was interested in that, because it was still limited to the subject. And then gradually we moved towards this piece of art that the film actually is, and the look of the director on what happened back then. And then gradually we could start getting an audience or some buyers in the beginning for the film. And now everybody acknowledges that it's a fantastic piece of art. It's a very, very different way of telling documentary. It's a mix of fiction and documentary that is very seldom seen. And that's what documentary film is. That's the artistic and story-wise interpretation. There's a lot of other elements as well, but yeah, I forgot your question.
We'll put that question aside for a moment. Let's take some more audience questions. Yes, please.
I understand that when you try to sell Eastern stories, the more exotic, the more comic they are, they sell, because funding is decided in Western Europe. I'm curious, maybe Mikael can answer any of you. What sort of Western stories sell from this point of view?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Citizen 4 at the moment is like the big film because it's in a way criticizing the US, which everyone loves doing. So that's one of the topics in other films that were. There was a documentary about the highway around Rome, which just like that isn't such a big topic, but it's won a big award and suddenly it's sold everywhere. So it's all also linked to the festival career, and of course there's quality to the film. I mean, it's very Italian subject, but it still works because many other cities around the world have this highway around the city, which kind of has its own life. And
No, but I could say I think there are two different kinds of films that sell. There is the one where you have access to something that we all want to hear about or see. If I had access to the Oval Office of Barack Obama for 2 weeks, I could sell that film like that, and it would travel. Even if I was a lousy director, I'm sure it would travel. There would be, and I am. I made one little film many years ago, so I can definitely confirm that I'm a lousy director. But if I had that access, I think I could sell that film. And the other kind of films are the ones that I spoke about just before, the ones where the director's interpretation is the interesting thing. I think they are basically the two kind of films that can sell. I could also put it from the other way, what kind of films doesn't sell? It's very often that you meet films that there are certain themes that a lot of films are about. For instance, refugees. And if it's a film about refugees and it sort of stays there, it doesn't travel because the Danish audience wants to see a film about refugees in Denmark, not in Romania. That's very, very difficult to sell. But that's because it hasn't taken the step beyond that. If it stays to be a film about something that we totally have in our own region or our own country, it doesn't sell. But then if the director tells a story about refugees in Romania that tells me something on this, whatever we call it, B or C level that I referred to before, that can learn me something about, wow, this is how the Palestinian next door feels. The one that I know from Denmark. I just had to go to Romania. No, I didn't have to go to Romania, but I had to go to this specific director in Romania in order to understand how the Palestinian in my next door feels. So I think, yeah.
Hello. In last October, there was public debate organized by the European Commission within the European Creative Europe program, and it was titled European Cinema: Why Do We Need More of It? I was wondering if you know about this initiative and if you can comment on it. The debate was streamed online. There were comments taken off social media, especially Facebook. The two sides were debating. One side was saying that we cannot really talk about a European cinema because we are homogenizing everything. The other side was saying that what's common to the European cinema is actually the diversity of stories that are kind of share a common history. And another interesting thing that followed, I think in November, there was a documentary 1989 by Anders Ostergaard that was again streamed, or it was screened simultaneously in, I think, 15 cinemas across Europe, and it was followed by a debate that was again screened online. That's in relation to how internet could actually play in creating identities. If you can comment on this initiative on the European, the Creative European program, and what would it mean in terms of distribution and in funding and in potentially creating a sort of common identity. That's problematic as well, like a common pan-European, like a pan-European identity through film, through European cinema. If we can talk about something like that. Right?
No, as Croatia is quite a new member of media, like Croatia entered the European Union last year, but we are part of media like last 4. Now I can say that this money helped quite a lot in developing films and also in distribution and all this. But it's not creating this what we are calling narrative. I mean, it's not unifying us with Netherlands or Romania or whatever. I mean, I would say we are at the moment just, I like this word, this transitional period, because we entered media very unprepared, and then it took like 2 or 3 years to learn all these models, how to get money. Now we are getting some money from that, but we need to be aware that this creative industry, it's something that it's something different than the author approach to the film, for example, if you ask me, because I mean, you need to fit to some standards to get that money. You need to fill in some holes, and you need to write something that would somebody else like who is writing reviews about your program. But okay, I will not put a story too big. So now for us it's quite important how it would be. I mean, I would probably know in 2 years, in 2 years' time. I mean, definitely it's good, but what's behind that we'll know later.
I think one thing that is important in this discussion is that the reason why the media program now Creative Europe was formed was to strengthen the European film industry so that it could compete better with the American. That's the fundament. So the Creative Europe is not a cultural agenda. It's an industry agenda, which I think is totally fair. I have no problems with that. I would love to strengthen the European film industry so that the American could be less influential. But that is the agenda of Creative Europe. So I think one needs to differ that from the art or the products or whatever we call it. And I think that is why this initiative was taken. So it shouldn't be mixed up with the discussion about the art. The other thing is that this film called 1989 by it's a Danish director called Anders Ostergaard. How many have seen it? Okay, it's I think there was a reason why it was a very popular pan-European screening. One thing was that it offered a different understanding of what happened when the Iron Curtain fell, and the main character was the Hungarian Prime Minister, who was elected a couple of months before, and he was the one who opened this little what is that called? this little tiny little gate, and then it said, "Pow." So on one hand, it offers a different understanding of something that everybody had heard about. I mean, it was of course an explosion in Europe when it happened, both from the eastern part and from the western part. So I think there was a big curiosity in terms of giving another understanding of something that we all thought we knew about. And then artistically, it was treated in a very, very, very different way. They used old archive material from a lot of internal meetings within the communist parties around some of the players in Eastern Germany, in Hungary, etc. And they had the referat. What is that called? The minutes. The minutes from a lot of important meetings, and then they had actors today to lip sync with the recordings of the actual the real people. It was a very provocative and very new way of doing things. So artistically, it was also very interesting. And I think for these two reasons, it really makes sense to have a pan-European broadcast of the film.
You mentioned that your proposal, your film, went through many pitching sessions before you got to that trailer and finally got financing. My question was, had you got financing in the first pitching session, would the film be different? And if yes, which version do you prefer?
I believe it wouldn't be different because basically we followed the story in like direct cinema manner. So in that way we really followed what the gangster was doing. So we were what was the word? So our story went by them. So not so many things are staged or arranged or things like this. We've just been there enough, like 2 years to get all the stories that are in the film now. It would be easier for us because at least we wouldn't need to risk with a possible bankruptcy because we enter with so much our private money, like money from the company, but also the director gave his own money and things. Would it be different? No, for sure not, but because the director is a director with a huge author integrity, and he really doesn't care. He would make the same film with bigger money or with smaller money. It was just about us as a production that we wanted to risk and to give some thousands of euros in advance without possibility to cover it at the end. Because all the money we got really when the film was almost finished.
And another fast question is like, does this justify lying in the trailer a little bit, just to get money and doing what you want?
You know, the gangster is one who say, like, when you want to seduce a girl, you need to lie a bit.
Yeah.
Like, not too much, but you need to lie a bit. And then it is one of his, like, wisdoms. Like later when you get the girl, like, no, you will be caught, but before, yes. So basically, I mean, I see it as a mixture between commercial, it sounds very bad when I say it now, but you are creating the trailers to satisfy someone who will give you money. And does it mean lying? Not really, as long as it is ethical, as you are clear with that what is ethical and what is not. I mean, I don't care will the Danish broadcaster say, or like, where is this in the film or whatever. I mean, there is why the broadcasters and commissioning editors are there to try to see what would be behind this trailer and what's really filmed.
Thank you.
I have to comment on that. If you, I don't want to be quoted on lying a bit because I don't think you should do that at all, not even a bit. And I think you'll have a very short career if you do it. We all know that the films end out being different than what was in the trailer, but that's because it's documentary. That's because you're going to predict reality. That's not the problem. But I would never make a selling trailer that I couldn't, support 100%. And I would never make it to convince a commissioning editor. I would always try to make it so that it represents in the best possible way the film the way I think it should be. We can discuss that for hours, but that was my short reaction to that.
Now I need to comment to you. No, the thing that I said, it doesn't mean that we lied in the trailer. But the way that you are creating the trailer always differently. I mean, you are playing with the story. I mean, from position A to position B is like 1 year. Like your story should be always the same. But because of the fact that the same commissioning editor would sit on the panel A and panel B, you change a bit for him, so you put more things or you change some other things just to look differently, so he can think it's still the same story, still, but you're creating visuals, you're playing with the commissioning editor, so he see that you're improving with the story, if you get me. So I mean, it's not really lying, but it's like technical adapting.
If we would move this to a different point of view, would you do the same film if it would be totally funded in Croatia and only for Croatian audiences? And this is a question for Alex also.
We would do the same film even if it wouldn't be funded by anybody. So it would be same film, I believe.
I have my doubts on that. I have my doubts on that. I think we're working in an environment that forces us to get funding elsewhere. And if you look at self-sufficient countries like France, who finances a lot, and there's a lot of documentaries made in France only with French money, it has a different, taste and appeal, and maybe it travels less, I think. Less self-sufficient countries like ours have to adapt, and this is not necessarily good, but funding, I think, it influences what we do in terms of storytelling.
It's more a philosophical question, because I mean, we almost finished the film when we got the first money. So we basically made all the film with our own money, so it didn't affect us at all. I mean, otherwise we would look for money in Bulgaria because we have Bulgarian character, but we didn't.
There's no money there.
So I mean, maybe Romania. I mean, we had Romania, and then we had let's look for money in Romania, but then the Bulgarian happened to be more interesting. I'm sorry, and no. So, but the financing is. I mean, every commissioning editor, every co-producer needs to put the fingerprint also in creative way of doing the film. And if we had co-producers in the beginning, probably it would be a different story. Yes, because German co-producer and Romanian co-producer would ask us to make the story differently. But luckily for us, they didn't ask it now, and I mean, when we were almost at the end.
For me, I mean, when I'm editing the story, that's where you shape it actually for the audience. I always think of an international audience. I never think about the audience like, okay, how would a Romanian react? And actually, I try to make the stories as clear and simple as possible and find the form that I feel. For example, I had, in the editing process with the last film, I was not sure that the story is telling itself, because it was really purely observational with kids that are not talking a lot, that are illiterate and so on. And so I decided, as in this trailer, I came back to the idea to have a voiceover. And then we were with the project at the Sundance Editing Lab, where I presented a rough cut that was actually working with a voiceover, and it was very strong and working. But then when I came back, I felt it was not it was not matching with my taste somehow, with my way of telling the story, of leaving a lot of space for questions, not giving answers. And I changed it a lot. I took out all the music, all the voiceover, everything. And the reaction of some people that were part of the Sundance experience were shocked. They said, like, it's not working anymore. That's the film, you killed the film. And now I found it, that's the film, and they said, like, no, it's not the film. And then they test screen it in the States with other people, and they said, like, they don't get the story. And I said, like, it's impossible, because I get the story, And then I test screened it in Europe, and everybody was getting the story, it was working, so maybe it would have been more internationally, even better with the voiceover and music, but in the end, I think you are your best audience, and you really have to, when you wake up after you let the edit, you know, away for a week or two, you have to feel the film is part of you. It represents you somehow. That's how I function. And if I feel something is aching, some organs are aching, I think like there's something wrong with my film. Then I go back to the editing room. And, yeah.
And it's a short one. What Alex was saying made me think about the practice of versioning films, because I think Alex is in the particular case in which he is a bit of on the model of the European auteur, but we are also thinking about professional filmmakers who are more for television and are more often commissioned by television. And I was wondering for our producer, but also for Alex, whether you had this case when you had to make a film, or you made a film, or you produced a film, and then you had to reversion it for various markets. And what are your observations from that kind of practice? Because this is something that happens in Eastern Central Europe only after the collapse of communism. Nobody would reversion a documentary in communist Romania. So what have you learned from this? Thanks.
Sorry, what do you mean by reversion?
By making changes to the structure of a film or to the storytelling for a specific commissioning editor. So adding voiceover, cutting certain bits, starting differently. I'm sure the practitioners know more than me about this.
I know how the German market is working because that's where I, you know, learned the job. And there you have, I mean, even if you make fiction films, even if it's your first film and it's half financed by the film school, you really have 3 to 4 commissioning editors sitting next to you in the editing room and saying, no, 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 it should say that, the film. And you know, then you really have to conform to them. There's no way around it. And that's why the German film is so bad, you know. I was lucky, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the films in Romania, because here you don't have to do that. And I was lucky to work with HBO, that are really completely open. And since they have a new commissioning editor, Hanka Kastelitsova, I mean, she is the perfect commissioning editor for storytellers, you know, because they don't have formats. You can make a film of 3 hours, of 2 hours, it doesn't matter. They will broadcast it. And they really look for the one original film, and they give a lot of credit to the artists, let's say. You know, it's one of their, you know, that's how they sell, you know, that they really give all the power to the artist. And it really happens, and so I was very lucky. I mean, the only thing that I had to do with the last film is, because I pre-sold it to different stations, is that I had to make a 60 and an 85-minute version. And it was really the maximum of changes I had to do. Which doesn't mean that I didn't send the cuts out to the commissioning editors, and whenever there were really strong and good arguments to change something, I did it, but because I was really sure that they are right. You know, not because I never did something against my own belief, so I was lucky until now.
No, well, first thing, I've met a lot of commissioning editors who are really clever and who have given some very, very good comments to films that I produced. And I know that the directors have also felt that.
Yeah, it was my case also.
Yeah, that's what, now I know, I'm not, but you know. And but also, the really good one, no, let me start somewhere else. There's a lot of, I mean, we all know cinemas. Cinemas have a profile. It happens quite often that I haven't really decided what film I want to see. I just go to the specific cinema because I know that it's 90% sure that they will screen a film that I would really like to watch. So they have, in a way you can say they have formatted the cinema. They have given it a profile that they have worked with for a long period of time. That is a very, very good director of the cinema who can do that, but it's also very important in terms of getting an audience. The good commissioning editors are doing the same. They are working with a culture slot, or with a history slot, or current affair, or whatever, that they have formatted so strongly so that I know that if I sitting a Wednesday evening, I don't know what to watch, and I see, this slot is on. Fantastic. Do I know the film? No. But I trust in the slot. Now that's a good commissioning editor's work. And I think we need to meet the commissioning editors' demands also with those eyes. There are bad commissioning editors. There are editors who don't, commissioning editors who don't care a fuck about film and don't understand film. But that's not the one we're talking about. We're talking about the excellent ones that have formatted really, really good slots. They are highly professional. And I think we should really take their views into consideration. And I think that we should respect that maybe it's because we sold them something differently than they expected. Maybe that's why the discussions comes up here in the editing room now. That was a defensorate for commissioning editors. I think it's needed now and then because I think we have a slight tendency to see them as people who give us money. And they also do that. But they also have a role to play in reaching out to audiences that we might not reach out to otherwise.